Chapter 1. The Birth and Early Life of Moses. The birth of Moses. Moses was born in a time of great peril for the Hebrews in Egypt. The Pharaoh, fearing the growing population of Israelites, decreed that every Hebrew male child be thrown into the Nile River. Moses' mother, Jochebed, gave birth to him and saw that he was a fine child. To save him from the Pharaoh's decree, she hid him for 3 months. When she could no longer hide him, she made a basket coated with tar and pitch, placed Moses in it, and set it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. Adoption by Pharaoh's daughter. Pharaoh's daughter came to bathe in the river and found the basket. Upon opening it, she saw the crying baby and felt compassion for him, recognizing him as one of the Hebrew children. Moses' sister, Miriam, who had been watching from a distance, approached Pharaoh's daughter and suggested finding a Hebrew woman to nurse the baby. Pharaoh's daughter agreed, and Miriam brought Jochebed, Moses' mother, who nursed him until he grew older. Then he was brought to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him and named him Moses, meaning drawn out of the water. Moses' early life in Egypt. Moses grew up in the Egyptian royal court, receiving an education and experiencing the privileges of royalty. Despite his Egyptian upbringing, he remained aware of his Hebrew heritage and sympathized with the plight of his people. Chapter 2. Moses' flight to Midian. As Moses matured, he became increasingly aware of the suffering of the Hebrew people. One day, he witnessed an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave. In a fit of rage, Moses killed the Egyptian and buried his body in the sand, hoping his deed would go unnoticed. However, the next day, he saw 2 Hebrews fighting and tried to intervene. One of them retorted, "Who made you a ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian?" Realizing his actions were known, Moses feared for his life. Escape to Midian. Pharaoh indeed sought to kill Moses for his crime. So Moses fled Egypt and journeyed to the land of Midian. There, he rested by a well and encountered the 7 daughters of Jethro, the priest of Midian. The women were being harassed by shepherds, but Moses defended them and helped water their flock. Grateful, Jethro invited Moses to stay with them. In time, Moses married Zipporah, one of Jethro's daughters, and started a family. He settled into the life of a shepherd, tending Jethro's flocks. Chapter 3. The Call of Moses. Years passed, and the oppression of the Israelites in Egypt continued. One day, while tending his flock near Mount Horeb, Moses encountered an extraordinary sight: a bush that was on fire but not consumed. Approaching the burning bush, he heard the voice of God calling to him from the flames. God identified himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he revealed that he had seen the misery of his people in Egypt. He commissioned Moses to return to Egypt and lead the Israelites out of bondage. Moses' reluctance and God's assurance. Moses was hesitant and expressed his doubts, questioning his own ability and authority. He asked God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" God reassured him, promising to be with him and providing signs to prove his power. Turning Moses' staff into a snake, making his hand leprous and then healing it, and turning water from the Nile into blood. Despite these signs, Moses remained reluctant, pleading his lack of eloquence. In response, God appointed Aaron, Moses' brother, to be his spokesman. Chapter 4. Moses and Aaron before Pharaoh. With God's assurances, Moses returned to Egypt, reuniting with Aaron along the way. Together, they gathered the elders of Israel and conveyed God's message of deliverance. The Israelites believed and worshipped God, encouraged by the signs Moses performed. Moses and Aaron then approached Pharaoh, delivering God's command, "Let my people go, so that they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness." Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he dismissed their request, questioning, "Who is the Lord, that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go." Instead of freeing the Israelites, Pharaoh increased their burdens, demanding they gather their own straw to make bricks while maintaining their quota. The Israelites' suffering intensified, and they blamed Moses and Aaron. The 10 plagues. God instructed Moses to persist. Pharaoh's refusal triggered a series of 10 devastating plagues upon Egypt. 1. Water turned to blood. The Nile and all water sources turned to blood, killing fish and fouling the water. 2. Frogs. Swarms of frogs infested Egypt, entering homes and beds. 3. Gnats. Dust turned into gnats, tormenting people and animals. 4. Flies. Swarms of flies filled the houses of Egyptians, but not the Israelites' dwellings. 5. Death of livestock. Egyptian livestock perished, while Israelite livestock remained unharmed. 6. Boils. Painful boils afflicted the Egyptians and their animals. 7. Hail. A devastating hailstorm destroyed crops and livestock in the fields. 8. Locusts. Swarms of locusts consumed what the hail had left. 9. Darkness. A thick darkness enveloped Egypt for 3 days. 10. Death of the firstborn. Every firstborn Egyptian, from Pharaoh's household to the lowliest slave, died in one night. Each time, Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he refused to let the Israelites go, despite the increasing severity of the plagues. Chapter 5. The Exodus. Before the 10th plague, God gave Moses specific instructions for the Israelites. They were to sacrifice a lamb and smear its blood on their doorposts as a sign for God to pass over their homes, sparing their firstborn. This event, known as the Passover, marked the beginning of the Israelites' liberation, departure from Egypt. In the wake of the 10th plague, a grief-stricken Pharaoh finally relented, urging the Israelites to leave Egypt. The Israelites, hastily prepared for their journey, left with unleavened bread and the spoils of Egypt. They numbered about 600,000 men, besides women and children. Pursuit by Pharaoh. As the Israelites journeyed toward the Red Sea, Pharaoh had a change of heart and pursued them with his army. Trapped between Pharaoh's forces and the sea, the Israelites panicked. God instructed Moses to stretch out his staff over the sea, parting the waters and allowing the Israelites to cross on dry ground. When the Egyptians followed, the waters returned, drowning Pharaoh's army. Song of Deliverance. Safe on the other side, the Israelites celebrated their deliverance with a song of praise led by Moses and his sister, Miriam. They sang of God's power and faithfulness in freeing them from bondage. Chapter 6. The Wilderness Journey. The Israelites' journey through the wilderness was marked by periods of doubt and rebellion. Yet God continually provided for their needs. When they lacked food, God sent manna from heaven and quail for meat. When they were thirsty, he made water flow from a rock at Moses' command. Mount Sinai and the Covenant. After 3 months of travel, the Israelites arrived at Mount Sinai. There, God called Moses to ascend the mountain, where he gave him the 10 Commandments, inscribed on stone tablets, and detailed laws governing worship and daily life. This covenant established the Israelites as God's chosen people, set apart to follow his ways. The Golden Calf Incident. While Moses was on the mountain, the people grew restless and urged Aaron to make them a god. Aaron fashioned a golden calf, and the people worshipped it, engaging in revelry. When Moses descended and saw their idolatry, he shattered the tablets in anger. He confronted Aaron and the people, and those who remained loyal to God executed judgment on the idolaters. Moses then returned to the mountain to plead for God's forgiveness on behalf of the people. Renewal of the covenant. God forgave the Israelites and renewed the covenant, instructing Moses to chisel out 2 new tablets. Moses once again ascended the mountain and received the 10 Commandments. When he descended, his face shone with a radiant glow from being in God's presence. Chapter 7. The Tabernacle and Levitical Laws. God gave Moses detailed instructions for building the tabernacle, a portable sanctuary where his presence would dwell among the Israelites. Skilled artisans, led by Bezalel and Oholiab, constructed the tabernacle and its furnishings according to God's specifications. The tabernacle included the Ark of the Covenant, the table for the bread of the presence, the lampstand, the altar of incense, and the altar of burnt offering. Consecration of priests. God also provided instructions for the consecration of Aaron and his sons as priests. They were anointed and ordained to serve in the tabernacle, offering sacrifices and mediating between God and the people. The Levitical laws, given to Moses, outline the requirements for worship, sacrifices, and purity. Chapter 8. The Journey to the Promised Land. Despite God's provision and guidance, the Israelites frequently complained and rebelled. At Kadesh Barnea, they refused to enter the Promised Land, fearing the inhabitants despite God's assurances. In response, God decreed that the generation of adults who had left Egypt would wander in the wilderness for 40 years until they all perished, except for Joshua and Caleb, who trusted in God's promise. During their wilderness journey, the Israelites faced various challenges, including conflicts with neighboring peoples. They experienced victories, such as the defeat of King Sihon of the Amorites and King Og of Bashan. They also encountered the prophet Balaam, whom King Balak of Moab hired to curse the Israelites. However, Balaam, compelled by God, blessed them instead. Chapter 9. Moses' Final Days. As the 40 years drew to a close, Moses delivered a series of farewell speeches to the Israelites, recounting their history and reminding them of God's laws. This address, recorded in the book of Deuteronomy, emphasized obedience to God's covenant and the blessings and curses that would follow based on their faithfulness. Moses' final acts. God instructed Moses to appoint Joshua as his successor and to ascend Mount Nebo, from where he could view the promised land but not enter it. Before his death, Moses wrote down the laws and gave them to the priests and elders, urging them to read it regularly to the people. He also blessed the tribes of Israel, offering prophetic words and encouragement. At the age of 120, Moses climbed Mount Nebo and saw the expanse of the Promised Land. There, he died in the presence of the Lord, and God himself buried him in an unknown grave in the land of Moab. The Israelites mourned for Moses for 30 days. Joshua, filled with the spirit of wisdom, took up the mantle of leadership, guiding the Israelites into the land promised to their ancestors.